All right, I'm going to do a quick crash course into the workflow that is taking your image from Bridge through Camera Raw and then into Photoshop and then out the other side. And once we go out the other side, we're going to save it in two different ways. We're going to save it as a Photoshop document that we can return to. We're also going to save it as a JPEG that can be used to upload for an assignment, or if you wanted to share it on Instagram, that's you could do that. So I'm going to use this image here. So if I'm in Bridge and I double click on it and it is a raw image, it's going to open up automatically in this window, which is Camera Raw, which is the Camera Raw plugin. So again, we do very basic modifications or adjustments in Camera Raw. The reason being, we get into Photoshop and we make a little bit more adjustments, like contrast and everything will be done in Photoshop. And that way we can do them on individual layers that we can turn off and on. But for now, I'm gonna do the blacks, whites, shadows, highlights. I don't really need to adjust my exposure because my histogram looks pretty good. But one thing I'll check in on is white balance. But I'm going to start with the blacks and the whites and the shadows and the highlights first. So I can just pull this left and right and I could look and see what looks good to me. This up here is also a warning telling me that we're clipping, which means that the blacks are becoming completely opaque. And that means there's no more information in the blacks. So we don't want that unless you really want that. Again, I showed you all a trick, and that is on a Mac. Forgive me, I don't remember the PC shortcut, but on a Mac, if I hold the Option key, I can see that clipping, that black opaque. You can see it in the bottom right and on the very top left. So I'm not really worried about that. That's just a very, very little bit of black. So I'm just going to make it so we can barely see those. Okay, so it was looking down here and up here. That's fine. I can hold Option and do the whites as well. Let me bring those up. And so here I'll show you as an example. If we can see those colors showing up and I release it, it means that that's too bright. Those whites are too bright. So I'm going to grab those and bring them down just so they disappear. Okay. So my whites and my blacks required very little adjustment for this particular image. Every image is different, unless you're photographing multiple images of the same thing. So I can pull my shadows up and I can do that by eye. I like a little richness in the shadows, so I'm going to bring that down actually. And then I'll check the highlights, which are really pretty good, but I also like to have muted whites, so I'm going to bring my highlights down. That's just a personal preference. This is the toggle between what it looked like before and after. Before, after. As you can see, especially in the steps, there's more detail where it was a lot brighter before. Right now, it's just kind of blown out, and if I click to how I changed it, you can see the information. So now what I'll do is I'll go up to the white balance, and I'm going to click on auto just to see what it does. So if you look here, you can actually read it. So 4900 on the blue and yellow, it brings it up to 5050, which is a little bit. It warmed it up. The magenta came up a little bit too. And sure, I like the way that looks. That's all I'm going to do to the image in Camera Raw. So I could either hit cancel, done, or open. I'm going to hit open so that it takes us into Photoshop. So now that I'm in Photoshop, I am going to do a very simple adjustment. I'm going to add contrast because, as you might remember me saying before, when you photograph in RAW, it actually gives you, the result is a flat file. And a flat file is wonderful when you want to have full control over your image. So over here on the right, you can see there's libraries, adjustments, properties. Adjustments is where we can choose our adjustment that we want to make, the tool that we want to use for the adjustment. I could also go down to this little half moon down here at the bottom and click on it, and it'll give me my list in actual text. So I could choose a curve from here, or I could choose a curve from here. Both of them do the exact same thing. So I'm going to delete one of those curves, And what I like to do, and I'm working on a laptop too, so I've got a pretty small screen myself. If I hit my F button once, it'll make my screen a little bit bigger, and it allows me to move my image to the left just using my scroll on my mouse or my keypad. But I like to be able to see my whole curve. So all I'm going to do is make a very simple adjustment. And if you remember, we've got black, shadows, whites, and highlights. And so if I bring up my highlights and down my blacks, or if I bring the dark part down and the light part up, that increases contrast. If I went the opposite direction, I would have less contrast. You can actually see it become just wide open and flat, which is a look. It's not how I prefer it. So I'm going to bring, and I'm going to add, because this was shot in broad daylight, there's already a lot of contrast from direct sunlight. So I actually don't need to add that much contrast, but I do want to add a little bit of a punch. And of course, this eye over here is the visibility for the layer. I can toggle that on and off. So that's with it on, that's my adjustment that I made, and that's with it as it was before. So I like that richness. I like being able to see that black. That it feels like what it looked like in broad daylight. So that's how the layers work. You add a layer, and you can toggle it on and off and make your adjustments. With something like brightness, contrast, levels, curves, no adjustment comes inherently made to the layer. So if I just put this layer in, I turn it off, nothing changes. I have to actually make an adjustment, and then I can see the change happen. There's one thing that I do want to talk to you about that I haven't yet, and that is cropping. It might seem like something that you don't maybe need to put tons of thought into. I'm in the crop tool, and the most important thing that I want you to know is this up here, delete cropped pixels. If I have this checked and I crop this image, let's see here, I don't want to come from the bottom, but here what we can do is bring it there. I'll bring this up. So if I have this checked, it actually is exactly what it sounds like. Delete cropped pixels. Everything that I've cropped out will be deleted and disappear. If I hit save and come back to this file, I'm not going to be able to get that back. So I don't want to do that. This is my history button up here. I like to have the delete cropped pixels unchecked so that when I make an adjustment, let's come up from the bottom left this time. When I make my adjustments, I want to save the shadow of the plant in here. That's really important. I'm going to hit return. And now, because this isn't checked, next time I open this file up, I can click with my crop tool back on the image. And as you can see over here, this is what it's going to look like. The image is still there. I could even go right click and reset crop. Well, it's not working right now. My computer's kind of slow, but what you are able to do is save all of your image that it was before and reset it back to the original image. Okay, so those are the tools that I wanted to share with you. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to save my image. So this part is really important because I want you to be able to do this confidently. I'm going to go up and I'm going to go to Save As, or I could do Shift Command S. But I'm going to go to Save As, and what's great about Photoshop is it inherently decides it should be a Photoshop document. What's great about a Photoshop document is when you reopen it, it'll contain the layers that you had before. So what I like to do is within my folder that the original image lives, I put a folder called PSD. And I never change the name of my images until much, much later. But what I do is create a subfolder, and layers are going to be included. And I hit save, and now this is saved as a PSD. I can also immediately, see there it is right there, I can hit Photoshop, JPEG, let's see here. And I could go to the JPEG folder that I've created, the subfolder within the date, and I can hit save. And it's going to pull up another window here with the JPEG options, and it says quality 12, which is the highest quality. Always click 12. There's another way to make images smaller without losing the image quality. The image quality is the most important thing. We don't want to look at pixely, fuzzy images. If you're doing this for the first time, it's probably going to be at like 6 or 7 or 8. Just go to 12. You want to be up there. And then you hit OK, and voila, your images have been saved to the destination that you chose. Again, be cautious with how you go about saving, because it's easy to lose things, especially when you rename them. I don't rename them because I can locate all my images because of their original file name and the date. It's just the way that it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. So that's the steps on opening your image, getting it into Camera Raw, finishing it off in Photoshop, and saving it. This is the most simple, basic steps that you have to do for every assignment. Thanks for tuning in.